Statehood Day is this weekend. Of course, we celebrated on last weekend, but the open house and everything that takes place at all the historical locations here in Chillicothe is going to be Saturday. And I am at the Ross County Heritage Museum right now with Tom Kuhn and also Pat Mettert. Thank you for joining us today. And you're going to take us on a bit of a walking tour today.
Yeah, we're going to go on a brief tour, Dan, and talk about some of the exhibits we have here at the Ross County Heritage Center that people will be able to see on Statehood Day for our open house.
And one of the first spots you've come into is the Requent Acquisitions, and you've got portraits and all types of items.
Well, yeah, this is one of the first rooms that people step into inside the main museum is our recent acquisitions room, and there's really no rhyme or reason to why we have the things in here other than they were recently acquired and donated to the society to be used for historical purposes here. So it's just kind of a catch-all of everything that people have given us recently.
And you've got all sorts of things. You've got an Aladdin Shrine hat from the Kentucky Colonels, also a wig with some unique sunglasses, a beautiful dress here, an afternoon dress dated back to circa 1895, and furniture items and the whole lot. So you need to come and check this out.
Right, and that leads you directly into our first main exhibit, which is called Chillicothe Frontier Settlement to State Capital, 1796 to 1816. And we'll step in here, and this is where we take a look at how Chillicothe was founded and became the capital of Ohio in its earliest days, and about some of the people who were involved in making all that happen. And one of the first people that we take a look at is Nathaniel Massey. And I have with me Pat Mettert, our historian and archivist here at the Historical Society, who could tell you a little bit about how Chillicothe was founded and what Nathaniel Massey had to do with it.
Pat has done a fantastic job of keeping this story alive, and so you are indeed one that we come to tell us such stories.
Nathaniel Massey was a surveyor, and he was a deputy surveyor for the Virginia Military District. He happened to own land within that district at the confluence of the Scioto River and Paint Creek, and he decided that would be an excellent place for a settlement, and hence we have Chillicothe.
Mm-hmm. And it's really grown. There's no question about that, but over the time, Chillicothe at one point in time with Camp Sherman here was close to 100,000 people in its citizenry.
That's right, and I don't know what they did with all those people because they couldn't build any more houses and they couldn't put up any more hotels, and I think there were people in doorways and every place else at that time.
If you pick up the doormats, you still find some people hanging around. You've got a lot of tracks laid out right here.
Well, one of the really cool things that we have in this exhibit next to Nathaniel Massey's portrait is the original plat map of Chillicothe. And this dates back to the earliest days. It shows you how the town was originally laid out. It's probably not changed too much other than all these lots that you see on the map are now filled with buildings. But in the earliest days, Massey attracted settlers to his settlement by offering free in-lots, which were the downtown lots, smaller, in what's now the historic part of Old Chillicothe, and also a free outlot, which were larger lots where they could use those for future development or for gardening or whatever purpose that they wanted to use them for. But this is an original map that was put together way back when Chillicothe was founded. And behind you we have some of the items that people might have brought with them who settled here in those earliest days, some of the tools that you would need to eke out an existence here in what was then the wilderness, and as you can see, there's quite a few different hand-wrought tools and implements that people would use for farming, for building a log house with, for hunting, and just trying to stay as comfortable as they could in the Spartan conditions that they had to live in.
Yeah, no chainsaws or bulldozers here.
No. And we have a case also with some of the early surveying equipment that people like Nathaniel Massey used to plot out people's property here in what was then the Virginia Military District. And we also have a logbook that was used by one of the surveyors. We have sextants and compass and transit and on a tripod that was used by one of the surveyors. And there were Pat, you know quite a bit about who some of the surveyors were, and besides Nathaniel Massey, of course.
Well, one of the more prominent was Duncan MacArthur, who happened to come with Nathaniel Massey. He was his chain bearer when he was laying out the town, and he then became a surveyor on his own. There was John Dunn, Cadwallader Wallace. I love that name. He was very prominent among the surveyors here.
Now, of course, Washington also was a surveyor back during his early days. Do we have any reports of him possibly surveying this area?
No, when he visited here, he did not, he was never here. He was along the Ohio River and saw the Ohio country, but he was on a sightseeing tour. He was not at that time working as a surveyor.
It's amazing that this equipment that is inside this case here looks like it could still be used today.
Oh, it's all in very good condition. And, you know, you think some of this may date back to the 1790s. Chillicothe, of course, founded in 1796. And at that time, it was pretty much a howling wilderness. And the veterans of the Revolutionary War from Virginia, who were given tracts of land as payment for their service, needed somebody to be able to find their land for them before they came out here and tried to settle on it. And so the surveyors had a very important job to do, and often, since there was little currency back then, were paid by being given tracts of land in exchange for their services. So the surveyors ended up as some of the largest landholders in the district.
And certainly some of the first white men to get a chance to see this land and then maybe even plot out what they would like to have in the future. As we continue through, we see Chillicothe's early settlers, politics of statehood as well, and an item that says, "Please do not touch."
Well, that is reputed to be Thomas Worthington's sea chest, and of course Thomas Worthington is known as the father of Ohio's statehood. And Pat can tell you a little bit more about Worthington. Of course, everybody in town should be familiar with his beautiful estate, Adena, up on the hill. But Pat?
Thomas Worthington was quite an adventurer. He also was a surveyor, by the way. And as a young man, he decided that he wanted to go to sea. So he did go to sea, and this was the chest that he took with him to keep his belongings in while he was out doing adventuring.
And this looks like it's about, I'm guessing here, about 18, 21 inches deep, and then, of course, wide, probably around 3.5, 4 feet.
Yes, that's right. And this dates to about 1790.
Okay. A lot of important stuff kept in there, no doubt.
Well, and going along with Thomas Worthington as the father of Ohio statehood, of course, we take a look at some of the other players involved in Ohio becoming a state. And of course, Worthington's main nemesis would have been Arthur St. Clair, the territorial governor. And his offices were over in Marietta, and he was a Federalist. And he, being the territorial governor, was in his interest to see that any states carved out of the territory were carved out in an orderly fashion that may help to have maintained his political power in the way they were carved out of the territory. And so he was not really in favor of Ohio becoming a state at that time, and that created a difficult situation between him and the people like Thomas Worthington here in Chillicothe, who were all in favor of a new state being carved out of the wilderness. And so we take a look at some of that political intrigue here in this part of the exhibit. And behind you we have a what's called a diorama, and this is a little model showing people what Chillicothe looked like in those earliest days. Of course, this isn't the entire settlement, but this is pretty much the heart and soul of the settlement, which today would be the main intersection of Water Street and Paint Street. And we built this little exhibit because there are no known images of Chillicothe from those earliest times. We have some very good period written descriptions and documents talking about what was located on each of the lots in town. And we know from our understanding of historical architecture that if the written description says there was a two-story brick tavern located on this lot, we kind of have an idea of what that tavern might have looked like. So using that information, we had our model builder put together this so people could see kind of what the settlement looked like and what life might have been like, a little taste of it. And it's kind of an interesting thing. There was a market house right in the middle of Paint Street, right up, probably in front of where Ivy's is today, and that is where people, brought their produce from their little farms and sold it to the people in town. There was a riot that actually took place. Pat, you want to talk about the Statehood riot?
Yes, I remember seeing the sign on that.
Because of the dissension, the political dissension at that time, Arthur St. Clair stayed in that tavern right there on the corner of Paint and 2nd Street, or Paint and Water Street. And there had been some political shenanigans going on with the legislature meeting here at that time, which led Michael Baldwin, who was one of the prime movers and shakers in the politics of the era, to lead his cohorts into trying to lynch St. Clair at the tavern. So they did march down the street with their lighted torches and so forth and try to draw him out so that they could maybe do him bodily harm. Fortunately for St. Clair, he was able to handle the situation himself, along with the help of Thomas Worthington, who, by the way, lived in that little white house just down the street, so it didn't take him, he didn't have to walk far to go quell the crowd.
Just around the corner from the mound right
That's
there.
right.
Of course, on the Statehood Day riots, you can read about that. There's a big placard there at the entrance towards Yaktangi Park down by the cabooses, if you'd like to check that out. We're going to take a break and be back as we continue with our walkthrough of the Ross County Heritage Center here on News Radio WB.